Nozzleheads back here again. We've got a little session. We tried to come up with something different here. We're going to talk a little bit about fungicide objections and performance-driven fungicide objections that we have both in corn and soybeans. They're out there. Probably the number one question we get with soybeans. Okay, I hear fungicides can cause green stems. What's your reply to that one?
So that's a tough one. I mean, green stem is not an exactly known phenomenon on why that always occurs. In my opinion, what we're doing is we're building up sugars in the stem. The stems stay green. A lot of times it's believed to be that we don't get those to the sink, right? So where we've got a lot of buildup of photosynthesis is not getting into the pods. That's typically why we see the green stems. Now, the typical cause for that can range. I know in years where we've had some excessive moisture and some excessive heat kind of late in the season, maybe even toward the end of that grain fill period when we're trying to shut those pods down, we get kind of a last flush of sugar. So I think some of it's weather related. I think a lot of it's insect related, which is also why you hear us talk a lot about putting an insecticide in with Revitec, right? We want to make sure that we're trying to keep all those wounds from those insects from stopping that sugar flow to that. And sure, fungicides I think can be associated with that green stem because we make that plant healthier. If you think about all the plant health benefits you get from our performance-driven fungicides like Revitec and soybeans, we are for sure increasing photosynthesis, which is driving yield. And so when we get more photosynthesis and more sugar buildup, we want to make sure it all travels there. So there's a perception that's connected, but I honestly don't think that the fungicide is always the root cause, or most of the time not even the root cause of that. And so I think we need to weigh out, really what could happen there as far as maybe what the cause could be, but it's not always preventable. And it's not always as easy to just say, well, I'm not going to spray a fungicide. Because at the end of the day, I've had a lot of guys go through and those beans cut pretty tough, or they didn't cut any tougher than the beans that weren't sprayed, right? I think at the end of the day, it has a lot to do with the weather, and I would rather have the bushels at the end of the day, regardless of what the green stems look like.
Well, and not to throw a curveball here, because we didn't talk about this one, but I just was thinking as you were talking, it's like, what have you really, I've never really seen more than maybe a week's difference in that type of thing. It's not like guys act like this is months sometimes or whatever. I think it's actually pretty short term, and the worst case scenario has typically been maybe a week. But we also run, the flip side of that is that it's a reality to have beans dry out in the field and start popping out of the pods. So that's not a good thing either. And so you kind of want to balance this out in the big picture.
Agreed.
All right, so the second one about soybeans would be herbicide and fungicides, combinations. Can I spray, I'm finishing up my last cleaning up weeds in the field, can I get my fungicide out at that time?
Yeah, that's a really common one I get, especially when we fight more and more water hemp these days. The challenge there is the timings don't match up for the best ROI. So we can for sure spray fungicides on soybeans before that R3-4 time frame that we've always recommended. But the challenge is we've got less plant there being indeterminate. So we typically see a less consistent and a little bit lower response in how many bushels we protect. So while you can go there, I don't think we're getting the best bang for our buck. So that's typically why they're separated. And frankly, there aren't any herbicides that I know of that are labeled in that R3 and 4 time frame. A lot of it's because during those reproductive phases, herbicides can actually drag our yield. So I try and encourage folks not to put them together, not because we can't have an opportunity for it. It's typically a little too early for the fungicide, or it's a little too late for the herbicide.
Excellent. Yes. All right, and then my final question here is, all right, I don't always see a response in soybeans. I can't, corn, it's sizable bushels, those type of things like that. I may not see that in soybeans. Am I getting a benefit from using a fungicide in soybeans?
Yeah, I think that also is a common challenge because in corn, we've seen the greenness, right? We've seen the standability, very visible. Soybeans are a lot different crop in the way they grow physiologically. And so we don't always see that visual response through the year. But on years where we've gotten dry and had really extreme conditions, that's where the performance-driven fungicides really stand out. We can see some of those visual responses in, kind of the leaf tension and how they'll stay upright longer, catch more sun. They don't droop as probably as early in the morning when we get real dry. I really think that sometimes we can see it, but it's not quite as often as we see in corn. Really, at the end of the day, it's all about putting, weight in those seeds during grain fill, and that's why we see it most of the time with the combine. It isn't as visual, I would agree with that. But frankly, our soybean portfolio, especially with Revitec, is the most consistent thing I sell as far as seeing a return on investment. And that's why, even though it's not visible, the tail of the tape comes down to the combine, and we typically do see it there.
Very good. Well, hopefully this has been helpful for you. We walked through some of those common objections that we have with it and kind of get you set up for heading into the soybean fungicide season. We'll catch you next time.